Hi guys, um, this is a VR to Bearded Bristol, but before we begin, um, I'm smoking my skull pipe. It's the first time I've been smoking it. Don't know whether you can see that properly. And in it I've got my Frankenstein mix, which is all my odds and ends, but it's a nice smoke. We were asked to give any good childhood memories we have, and some of the memories I have, the good childhood memories, are based around maybe other people who I ran into on the marshes. I spent most of my spare time wandering around the marshes around our house. There were fantastic places of um, discovery and of all sorts of things. We had what were known as koipu rats. They had been let out by a lady who'd imported them, and they caused a lot of damage. And if you shot one, you got a bounty of 2 and 6pence. But my air gun wouldn't touch them. They would just sit there, and the little pellets would bounce off them, which made them good targets, but I never did get 2 and 6pence. But one day when I was wandering through the marshes, there was a guy in a big digger clearing out the dikes, and during one of his tea breaks he called me over, and he was a magician, so he showed me a few magic tricks, and gave me the occasional sweet. But one day he sat down, lit a pipe, and we just sat and talked. He didn't talk to me as a child, he talked to me almost as an equal, and we talked about the marshes, we talked about what we could see, and we'd point out to each other things. And it was a very magic time. Magic because A, he was a magician and could show me tricks, but magic also because it was one of those strange meetings that we instantly bonded as sort of two people, soul to soul, and were just talking. And getting to know things. So most of that summer, I would sort of make my way down to the marshes and look out for him. And he'd stop what he was doing, and he'd get his flask out and have a drink, have a pipe, and we just talked. But one day I went down and he wasn't there. The dikes had been cleared, the banks had been left with mud, and it seemed to me that that sort of somehow symbolised what had happened, that we'd had that closeness and now it was over. It had to be over. He moved on. But he's somebody I've never forgotten. And there were people like that on the marshes all the time. They were wild places, and you got people who were shooting ducks, you got people who were gathering mushrooms, you got people who were travelling down the River Yare and had pulled up at the side of the river and had got out for a look around. One of my favourite places on the marshes was a watermill. It was still standing in bricks and that kind of thing, but the inside looked as if it had all collapsed, and a lot of the cogs were not connected anymore, and it was rotting wood and piles of rubbish. But I used to go in there most times that I was on the marshes for a look around or to get out of the sun or the rain. And what I would do is sort of step over the broken woodwork, walk along a a beam and to be at the other side. And it was only as I was thinking about this today, I wonder what would have happened if the beam would have fell in, because there was no way I could have gotten out. And there's no way anybody would have come down and found me there, I don't think. At least not until months later. But it was a great place to be, a great place to grow up on the marshes. And before I got to the marshes, there was a wooded area, which was, again, all sorts of things. And Carolyn and I had some cherries this week, and they looked exactly the same as the cherries I could get from a tree down onto the marsh. We called them marabellas when I was a child, and I used to look forward to going and gathering them. But there were good memories as well at school. It was a village school, one teacher and 2 classrooms. But there came a time when the Forestry Commission wanted to plant oak trees. A lot of the oak trees had either gone, or I don't know what happened, whether they'd been cutting them or whatever, but they wanted to gather acorns and get them sent to them by the local schools so that they could renew oak trees around. I suppose in the old days it was done to build the wooden walls that protected England from the sea. The big 4-deckers and smaller frigates and that kind of thing. But on this particular day, we were asked to go and collect acorns. And the teacher was a woman teacher, Miss Ward we knew her as. But she was actually married and had a husband who was a photographer. And in fact, he took some photographs of me as a child, which look like little Lord Fauntleroy. You know, I was there in a jacket and trousers and a pocket watch and looking all for the life like a laird's son or the Lord of the Manor's child. And he came and he picked up the bags of acorns, the sacks that we'd filled. And so well did we do that the school got an accommodation and an award. I used to like the nature walks. There was all sorts that we saw, and my favourite creatures of all were the dragonflies and what we called the racers, which were a type of dragonfly. But there was one time when the Forestry Commission gave me money. They gave me quite a lot of money in a way for a child at the time. What had happened is I was going, I don't know whether I was going to school or coming back from school. And I got to the new forest where they were planting new plants, and the trees were about 3-4 foot tall. And I noticed that there was a fire. Which for the forestry was just devastating. You could lose a lot of money, you could lose a lot of land. And I raced back down to the village and called the fire brigade and told them exactly where the fire was. And, I forgot all about it until a couple of months later even, or even more. This man came to the door and my mother answered the door and he asked whether he could see me. And I'd been awarded 10 shillings for saving the forest, which was a nice thing to get. It meant that I could keep my air rifle going and that kind of thing. So there were good times in the country, and as a country boy, you learned all about nature. You learned all about animals and trees and plants. Much of it that I've forgotten now. but much of it was just me and the marshes. And, you know, on a foggy day, the marshes could be a strange place because there used to be a bird called the bittern, which covered most of the marshes. And the male birds used to stretch their necks up and their heads sort of straight upwards, and they'd make this cry, which was sort of like a boom going across the marshes. And you'd be walking through the mist and you'd hear this bittern crying, sort of an incredible sound, one that I've never forgotten. And the final thing that I saw that are very rare now were swallowtail butterflies. I think there's only one part of Norfolk that has swallowtails now. But they were very beautiful, yellow and black and that kind of thing. So that's some of my good memories of being a child. I'm going to end, as I usually do, with a story, one that you may know. If so, I'm sorry. You probably know most of the jokes I tell. There was a police officer who was in his car, sort of at the side of the road, when he's passed by a speeding guy. And the police officer sets off in pursuit, and the guy just keeps increasing his speed, going faster and faster, until he's well over 100 miles an hour. But eventually he realises he can't escape and finally pulls over. And the police officer approaches the car and he says to him, "Look, mate, it's been a long day and my shift's almost over. So if you can give me a good reason for your behaviour, I'll let you go." The guy thinks for a few seconds and then he says, "Look, I'll be honest with you. It's my wife ran away with a police officer about a week ago. And I thought you might be that officer trying to give her back."